The Royals have gotten more preseason hype in one off season than they have in the previous 6 seasons. Is that a good thing or is that a bad thing? We'll talk about it next on Locked On Royals.
You are Locked On Royals, your daily Kansas City Royals podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thank you for tuning in to another edition of Locked On Royals on the Locked On Podcast Network. As always, I'm your host, Jack Johnson. Be sure to give me a follow on Twitter or X at JohnnyJ_15. That's at JOHNYJ_15. You also, starting tomorrow, can catch us on all podcasting platforms like Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, Google Podcast, Odyssey, and we're always on YouTube. Just be sure to hit that follow button and subscribe. As I mentioned on Friday, about the other outlets you can listen to and why it's going to come back on Monday, not for today's episode. Friday and Sunday's episode just going to be available on YouTube. I know I had somebody in the YouTube comments say, don't forget to post it on the other podcasting sites. Well, I can't do that till Monday. We've kind of changed up on how we post them to those platforms, so that's not going to be available until Monday. And the typical one we use isn't active anymore. So unfortunately, this episode today, as well as the one on Friday, it's not going to be on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, all the ones you listen to in a much simpler fashion. But it is always going to be available on YouTube. You can always get the live stream version of that. I apologize for that inconvenience, but that's just the way it's going to have to be for one more episode. Then moving forward, not going to be an issue. And I would also say moving forward, not going to have many weekend episodes. It was very chaotic the last 2 weeks, trying my best to get 5 episodes out there, dealing with some technical difficulties, dealing with bad internet. Yesterday just had way too much going on. Wasn't able to get a podcast episode, but thought before today's game, Cole Ragans taking the bump. Again, I think you might be able to watch it on cable. I'm not really sure. I know it's frustrating. I've been getting loads and loads of questions about Amazon Prime, Bally Sports. I really don't have a ton of info on it. I can tell you this. If you watched him last year on Bally, whether it was cable or the app, that's going to be available moving into the season. I think that's going to be an outlet. If they do switch it and they say Amazon Prime, no longer Bally Sports app, then you'll just make that switch. Is there going to be an additional fee? I would imagine likely with a package deal. You're not just going to pay for the Amazon Prime subscription, which I already do. I think it's like $15. It's probably going to be something on top of that. But there's not a lot that has been finalized. So what I can tell you is that Bally Sports, the app, ballysports.com, you can watch the game today on that. For cable users, I think it comes down to certain providers that are going to be switching over to the Angels broadcast and watching that game. Again, it's so confusing. I don't even have all the answers. It's frustrating to me. I don't think it should be this hard to watch your baseball team. So if there's a certain time I give out wrong information, I promise you it's not to lead people in a different direction. It's because I'm trying to figure this out the best I can because I use the app. I don't have cable. So I'm going to be able to watch it on the Bally Sports app. But I know for a lot of people, you don't have the app. You have cable and you want to watch the game today. I can't lock in an answer because I've heard 4 or 5 different answers as to if people can watch on cable and if they cannot. So I think it comes down to your cable provider. Again, it's up in the air. What I can tell you with confidence, I do not believe watching a baseball team should be this hard. If you're going to make an app, if you're going to pay a subscription to watch a team, it shouldn't be this complicated. It should not be this confusing, even if it is spring training games. So for the Amazon Prime deal, again, fingers crossed, it's before the regular season. I just don't have a definitive answer for you. It's been radio silent for the last month or so. So we'll see what's going on moving forward. But that's the most I can give you. I don't know if I can even try to. I don't think it's a good thing to guess either. I shouldn't be guessing on what is going to happen because I don't want to lead people in the wrong direction. That's the last thing I want to do. But today, if you've got the app, you go through the app, you're signed in, you'll be able to watch the game. Cole Ragans taking the bump, and we're going to talk about that in the final segment today. What I wanted to open up Sunday's episode with is about this offseason hype. And I think where it's frustrating other fan bases, it's giving Royals fans a lot of reason to be hopeful. And I think it certainly bounces back and forth between this line of what's good and bad. Off-season hype, I think, is a really good thing for the fan. For the fan, it's great because here in Kansas City, what have you had to get excited about other than baseball's coming back the past 6 seasons? This team has been 100 loss potential for at least 4 of those. If I'm counting the COVID year and the year they went out in 2021 and brought in Santana, Benintendi, Mike Minor, a couple pieces of the bullpen. Other than those 2 years, 100 loss potential every single offseason. So this offseason has been a breath of fresh air. It's been fun. It's been exciting. They've been active in free agency. They extended their star in Bobby Witt Jr. You feel good about the direction of this team. And I think the Royals set a format here of what small market teams should do, especially ones that are losing. We talked way back at the beginning of the offseason why the draft lottery was to incentivize the bad teams from tanking. That just wasn't going to happen in baseball anymore, though we still have teams that are tanking. The Oakland A's aren't going to spend any money. Now, Oakland's been like that for longer than just a few years. I mean, even in the great years where Oakland was winning the West or at least competing at the top half of the West, they weren't spending a lot of money. Hell, there's a great movie about it in Moneyball. They've not been a team that spent a lot of money. So that idea of, well, we can find talent without spending a lot of money, that makes it easier on the owner. That's one way to do it. Moneyball, of course. But baseball constantly changes. Baseball constantly has this different approach of how you can win games. I think a couple years back, home runs weren't as important. It was get guys on base, move them, put the ball in play. Doesn't need to be hard contact. Now more than ever, hard contact, max velocity, home runs, hitting the ball 450, 460 feet. It matters when developing a roster. And this Royals team, for the first time in 6 off seasons, really developed a team that is more modern day than they've been trying to develop the last handful of years. And that's a very good thing. And that's where the good hype comes from. I also think there can be a negative side to it of it's setting you up to fail. And that's the dark side of off-season hype. Because whereas Royals fans have gone from this team is the worst I've ever seen, 56 wins, to in a couple of months change from we can compete in the Central. It sets you up to fail if the team only wins 75 games. Or they get off to a cold start in April, right? To me, I love the offseason hype. It gave me more things to talk about other than, who's going to be the 6th or 7th guy out of the bullpen? I had legitimate stuff to talk about. However, I can definitely see a scenario in which this team with a tough schedule in April comes out and doesn't play unbelievably well. Like it may take a little bit of time for these pieces to come all together. And I also am not naive to the fact the team lost 106 games last year. Like if they win 75 games, that's nearly 20-win improvement. But to a lot of people, that's not going to matter. You're going to go, they sucked just as usual. And it's not for me to preach this and to give grace on a team that wouldn't make the playoffs. Hey, the goal at the end of the day is to win the World Series. There are going to be failures along the way. There are going to be guys that don't succeed, coaches that don't work out. But I would just say that with this team, there has been so much back and forth on what I believe is the good and bad of off-season hype. Off-season hype, I think, was perfect for this team and this franchise at what they were going into, a downtown stadium. You want to bring the fan base back in to Kauffman Stadium. You want to reel back in all those fans that just really showed up for 13, 14, and 15 and give them a reason to go to the ballpark. And that is the good thing. That's the good that happened. I've got my tickets for opening day. I know a lot of people are still debating, but I'm sure there will be some more people as we get to the beginning of March start buying those tickets and do so over on Gametime. And the place is going to be buzzing. And whereas last year it was sold out at Kauffman Stadium, but I do think everybody looked at the team and said, it's going to be a little bit tough. I think that there's going to be this energy and this juice at Kauffman Stadium on March 28th that we haven't seen in quite some time, that fans really believe this team can go far. And that always is a good thing because I think baseball, a lot of it is for the fans. You want to grow that interest. You want to make it entertaining for them. And off-season hype is really step one. Now, my final take on it is you can be the realistic fan, you can be the negative fan, you can be the positive fan, pick whatever path you want to. But I can tell you this, for baseball to grow as a sport, for baseball to become popular, you need to have off seasons with bad teams like the Royals had. Hey, we're not going to stand for 106 losses, and we're going to spend enough. We're going to make enough good moves where we start having national outlets, MLB Network, talk about this team competing for a Central, or competing for the Central, I should say. That to me is good for baseball. You don't want to write off teams immediately before opening day. And that's the sad reality of baseball. There's a lot of teams that we're just going to write off immediately, whether it's the toughness of their division, their lack of aggressiveness in the offseason. You're going to be stuck in this spot of, well, I'm going to keep watching this team, but I know they're not going anywhere for at least a little bit. Royals fans have a reason to believe this team can compete and contend. But as I said from surprise, as was the common theme among the players, this is a team that knows it's not just about the offseason hype. It's about actually going out there and proving that hype was real. Okay, we're going to take our first break of the show. When we come back, I'm going to tell fans out there who may not watch spring training a lot or are trying to figure out what to take away and what not to take away, how you can judge spring training. That's coming up on Locked On Royals. You are tuned into Locked On Royals on the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jack Johnson. Be sure to follow me on Twitter at JohnnyJ_15. That's at JOHNYJ_15. A reminder that moving forward, March Madness is right around the corner, so go over to FanDuel and create your account. I know today was a little bit weird for a time period to put out an episode. I said it was going to be on Saturday or on Sunday. I missed the opportunity to do an episode on Wednesday, I think it was, or at least I recorded an episode and it didn't record any of that audio. But that was one of the days. Wanted to give a shout out to FanDuel, also a shout out to Gametime. So we're still going to do that in today's show a little bit. Go over to FanDuel, create your account, and start placing some bets, start winning some bets before baseball season rolls around. Okay, so for spring training, there's always a template I feel like you got to follow on how you can judge players, how you can evaluate successes, failures. It's a lot of different things that factor in with spring training. And where I would usually, admit my wrongdoings, admit where I can be a hypocrite, I think it's, a point in time where I need to be the smarter person here. I need to be the smarter version of myself. I need to give the fans out there that want to figure out, what can I take away? What can I actually believe? What should I not believe? And I need to go out there and give a definitive answer as to what you can gather from spring training. The reality is, as you're going to hear a lot of people say, it's nothing. There's not a single thing in spring training that you can take away. That's what I've come to terms with, come to grips with. As a fan, as somebody that covers the sport, spring training, simply put, does not matter. It's scrimmages. It's batting practice. It's bullpen sessions. At the end of the day, there is one thing that remains important. One thing and one thing only. It's health. Now, the Royals, through 2 games, only injury they've had, or at least a concern, was Christian Chamberlain. Matt Cotrero said, he's feeling pretty sore, had arm tightness, didn't feel a pop in his arm, but there's a Royals prospect who you hope the best for, and it's nothing too serious. I just don't see how I can invest myself into one player or 2 players and say, if they've got a really good spring, I feel good about them in the regular season. Because the reality is there's no common theme. There's no linear execution of spring training. You can hit 400. You can hit 450. And then go out in April and hit $130. That's just baseball. I remember for years that Mike Moustakas would torch Cactus League pitching. I mean, he would come down to Surprise and just look like a modern day Ted Williams, just smoking the ball. He couldn't find a glove anywhere. It just was finding the outfield grass. If he hit something soft, it found its way through. And then remember early on in his career, he struggled a lot. And then you kind of see players age and mature a little bit, and they realize it's about me perfecting some things. It's about me working on some things. In fact, I remember in that same time period when Mike Moustakas was tearing the cover off the ball in spring training, James Shields would get rocked in his outings. I mean, he would get tagged, at least a couple ones I can remember off the top of my head, because he would go into some outing thinking, oh, I need to work on one pitch. I'm going to use that over and over again, even if it's a 3-0 count, 3-1 count. I'm going to fine-tune that changeup, which was so good in his career. I'm going to fine-tune that fastball. I want to locate a little bit better. And that is what spring trading is used for. You know, you see a guy get lit up, don't read into it too much. You know, Cole Ragans, he throws today. We'll talk about him in the final segment. If he gives up 5 runs in one inning, you know, to me, I'm hoping that velocity looks good, that command looks good, but I don't really care about the numbers. And if he strikes out the side in one inning and Matt Contreras says good, I think it'd be common for the fan to go, well, wow, he's going to win a Cy Young. You know, we're feeling good about it, at least the ones that want to overreact. I did that a lot, you know, growing up watching this game. I would overreact, even in the bad years. I mean, I think a perfect example is why you can't take anything away and why I'm not asking you to go and watch these spring training games and hope for losses. That's not the thing. It doesn't matter how many you win or you lose. If they win, hey, great, you feel good about it. You go to a game and somebody like Drew Waters, like he did in game 1, rips a 440-foot home run to left center field, feel good about it. I'm going to see something cool, and maybe that does give him confidence. You can't really pinpoint anything, but the perfect example I have is that the Royals in 2015 came a half a game from winning the Cactus League. That team went on to win the World Series. The team last year was a half a game away from winning the Cactus League. They lost 106 games. There is no easy comparison. And then the final point of this is, well, what about the spring training battle? So you still have to go into that and have some sort of, you know, merit to it. There has to be some sort of evaluation spring training if you're going through a position battle. I would say yes. For instance, the second base position, you know, Michael Massey, Nick Lofton, Adam Frazier, Garrett Hampson. I think you can evaluate those guys, but I'm just saying I'm not sold if Adam Frazier hits 440 and Michael Massey hits $120, that I'm going to judge a month's worth of games and go with Adam Frazier. Now, I remember in 2019, I think it was, the Royals had Brian Goodwin playing for the center field spot or the right field spot, at least to make the roster. And Brian Goodwin could not buy a hit in spring training. He couldn't do anything. I mean, he was 1 for 30, I think. I mean, wasn't hitting the ball hard, striking out a lot. And the Royals cut him and used that roster spot to re-sign Lucas Duda. Lucas Duda, as we all remember, was terrible in 2019, was terrible in 2018 for that matter. Brian Goodwin caught on for the Angels and was an above-average hitter in center field for an extended period of time. Did it make the Angels a playoff team? No, but that's kind of the point I'm getting back to. At times, I feel like the Royals were over-evaluating some guys that were struggling when maybe they were tinkering with some stuff. Hey, you know, I want to generate a little bit more power. I might change my hand placement. I might change my footing in the box. I might change, you know, when I load up. If I do a high leg kick, if I just do a weight transfer, and then I'm, you know, swinging full force, swinging 75%. Again, it really doesn't matter, which is why in these first 2 games, I think it's cool to see the young guys compete, because to the rookies, to the prospects, those are big time at bats for them. They are trying to showcase themselves in front of major league competition and a major league coaching staff. Because even if they don't catch on with the Royals, and maybe they would be a roster casualty, a DFA, somebody else they played against could pick them up. You know, they are playing for something. But for the opening day starters, and why I am thrilled the Royals, for the most part, have their lineup set. I don't like competition. I really don't. It goes back to, if you're a football fan, a college football fan, more so college than the NFL, but for college football, you'll hear about quarterback controversy going into fall camp. And it's, oh, we've got 2 really good guys that we feel good about, and they're going to have to earn it. I always called BS on that. And I covered football for a point in time in college, and I would just call BS on it, not to the coach, but just to other colleagues, to other friends. I'm like, they don't have two quarterbacks. They have no quarterbacks. They don't have a starter. Clearly, the gap between the starter and the bench player is not big enough. So that's not good for your team. That's why I always hated it going into spring training that the Royals would have all these position battles. Well, if your center fielder is not much different than your fourth outfielder, then that's a problem. There's not a big enough gap. You need to commit to somebody and then let everybody else know fighting for a roster spot, hey, these are for bench spots. That's the way I would go about it. Now, you can motivate a player. I know it wouldn't be the biggest motivation tactic to say, hey, you're playing for the 25th and 26th spot on the roster, but it is a roster spot, and you can prove yourself from there. But I'd almost like it if the Royals came out and said, Massey's our second baseman, Isbell's our center fielder. I know we've got Drew Waters fans that listen. We have Nick Lofton fans that listen. But I don't think you can get enough in spring training. I do not think there's enough you can take away from it to really make a firm decision for the regular season. It's all just scrimmages. The most important thing is health. Get out healthy, and then you feel good about it. Of course, you hit well. Confidence going. I mean, Michael Garcia was 2 for 3 the other day. I had a feeling that he was going to be one of those hitters that took off in spring training just because he played all off season long. But these are games to just get them back into the swing of things. It's like, you're going to the gym and running on the treadmill for a little bit. It's helping you. You go run for 15, 20 minutes. It's helping you. It's getting you back in shape, but it's not transforming your body. No, I guess if you ran at a certain speed and ran for longer, then there you go. But you need to eat right. You need to, lift weights. Maybe you're a CrossFit person, but to me, it's like this is just slowly jogging. This is taking a brisk walk. Don't hurt yourself because then you can't work out the rest of the way. That's the way I look at spring training. It's like it's just slowly getting your body back into the groove of baseball. That's what these players, I think, take it as. They want to get good swings. They want to be feeling good about themselves going into the regular season. But as for the stats, don't buy into them. Good or bad, don't buy into them at all. Just worry about the health of this team. Before we move on to our final segment, I want to give a shout out to Locked On Sports Today. It's here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On. You can find them on all the free Fire TV channels app. Again, that is Locked On Sports Today. For our final segment, we're going to talk about the guy that's taking the mound today against the Angels. The first game, a handful of you, a chunk of you, will be able to actually watch on the Bally Sports app or even on cable. Again, I'm not locking myself into anything because I know some people out there won't be able to get it through cable. So I guess we'll just see at 2 p.m. Later on today. But Cole Ragans, he's taking the bump. What do I think about this offseason hype? Do I think he can live up to it? And is he a guy that can be as good as he was for those 9 or so starts in 2023? That's coming up on Locked On Royals. You are tuned into Locked On Royals on the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jack Johnson. Be sure to give me a follow on Twitter or X at JohnnyJ_15. And a reminder, today's episode is only available on YouTube. I had some comments on the last video post. Only Friday and this one are going to be on YouTube starting tomorrow. No issues whatsoever with Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, Google Podcast, and YouTube. Or Odyssey, I should say. YouTube is going to be just fine. But Monday through Friday, moving forward the rest of the season, not going to be an issue whatsoever. We are just changing the way we upload podcasts, and that outlet, the way we do it, is not going to be active until Monday afternoon. So that'll be back to normal for tomorrow night's podcast. Just for today, though, it is going to be on YouTube. And as we had the previous 2 days, we've got Royals baseball coming your way at 2 o'clock. Bally Sports app will be putting the game out for those that have the subscription, have the TV provider that work for it. Cable, I wish I could tell every cable user out there if it's going to be on there or not, but I think it comes down to your TV provider. I can't lock into anything, unfortunately. I apologize for that. I don't have cable. I've only got the Bally Sports app, so I know I'll be able to watch the game, keep some people updated that aren't going to be able to watch it. But overall, I don't know if everybody out there is going to be able to watch it. I know on March 17th, I think it is, the Royals will have their first broadcast. That'll be Ryan Lefevre, Rex Hudler, Jake Eisenberg, the guys that do great work down there. That won't be an issue. That'll be available for everybody. But for some of these games that don't have the Royals broadcasting crew, I'd imagine it's a bit of a toss-up. So that's what I can give you at this point in time. As for Amazon Prime, I do not know. I do not know when it's going to be in place. I do not know what the pricing would be. So unfortunately, if you guys keep asking me, I'm just as in the dark as you guys are at this point in time. I don't have any other further knowledge on that. But the bright thing is Cole Ragans throws today. Cole Ragans will throw for the first time in spring training. You can feel good about that. Hopefully, it's just one inning. Again, I am very much of a fan that is on edge in spring training. I like baseball being back, but I get so anxious and so worked up over guys that are going to have big time roles in the upcoming season staying healthy. I mean, could you imagine how much hair I ripped out watching Adalberto Mondesi play in spring? And I remember vividly that back in 2021, I think it was, he had made it the entire way, the entire spring. In the final game of the year, he took a swing on his oblique, he felt his oblique tug a little bit, and then that sent him back for basically the entire year. And then there was an ACL injury in 2022. We all remember. If you're a Royals fan, you remember the Adalberto Mondesi saga and what that was like in spring training. Cole Ragans is a guy that has so much expectation going into the year. Whether you think it's fair or not, the national outlets are talking about him. Hell, there's bets being placed on him to win the Cy Young. In fact, MLB Network had a segment on him. He was picked as a dark horse to finish top 3 and had an outside chance to win it. We can't protect and hide Cole Ragans anymore from the exposure he's going to get, which is why I go back to a couple of episodes ago when I was going over Cole Ragans, the opening day starter. And I said, well, there's no more need to, hide him. There's no more need to protect him. And well, let's start Michael Wacha opening day because Cole Ragans can't be number 1. I now rebuttal at this point. I mean, you don't think Cole Ragans knows that he's being talked about as a Cy Young candidate? You don't think he knows about all those segments that were out there about his fastball velocity and the way that he changed his arsenal a bit? He sees that. He understands that. And these players, we always just think that they don't like pressure and they don't want to be the guy. I mean, wouldn't you want to be the guy? Imagine you were working at the office and there was a high-ranking spot in the office. Let's say as like the vice president or something, or a business manager of something. And that spot oversaw everything in the building. It's a lot of work, a lot of pressure. You have to make sure everything goes right and it falls on your shoulders. But you want that spot, right? I'm assuming you'd want that spot. It'd be an increase in pay. You get to be your own boss. I could imagine that Cole Ragans has this same take of, well, why do I have to be the number 2 or the number 3? Michael Wacha has been the business manager before. I feel like I'm the best pitcher on the staff. And people are noticing that around the company, around baseball. Cole Ragans knows that he's a dark horse to win the Cy Young. Cy Youngs are not number 2s and number 3s in the rotation. They are the aces. They are the number 1s. And that's why I think it's the perfect opportunity to pencil him in there. I really do think it is. The Royals are good at evaluating that top spot in the rotation, I believe. Last handful of years, they took the approach of, we want the young guy or the experienced guy to take it. Zach Greinke. Zach Greinke was the opening day starter the last 2 years. He was 38 and 39 years old. They didn't give it to Brady Singer for a reason. Even after Brady Singer's dominant 2022, he had the WBC, of course, but he was somebody that they didn't just hand over the reins to be the number 1. Brad Keller was the number 1 for a chunk of time. It wasn't Brady Singer. This feels like that opportunity of, why does Michael Wacha or Seth Lugo have to wear it as the number 1 just to protect Cole Ragans? Why can't they wear it as a number 2 or number 3? I think we read in a little bit too much to what a number 1 of a rotation really means. I think in the past it was these guys have to throw 220, 230 innings. No, you just have to be a very effective, good starter and the anchor of your rotation. No, Cole Ragans hasn't thrown 180, 185 innings before. He's never been a full-time starter. But we also can understand the fact that he's the best pitcher on this team. He is. I will go as far to say that he's the best pitcher on this team. And I think there's easier ways to provide him some relief. If he starts and doesn't throw that well on opening day, well, you back it up with Michael Walker and Seth Lugo and then Brady Singer after that. I feel pretty good about that. If Michael Walker goes out there and struggles on opening day and you turn it over to Ragans and he doesn't pitch well, when you kind of feel a little bit iffy about that rotation, just because of the natural overreaction to it. But to me, man, you're getting hyped now and talked about as a Cy Young candidate. Who says he can't take on that pressure? Who says he can't try and live up to those expectations? It's not going to be much today. Stay healthy. Fastball velo look good. And I think I'll walk away feeling pretty good about Cole Ragans. Well, that's going to do it for another edition of Locked On Royals on the Locked On Podcast Network. I've been your host, Jack Johnson. Be sure to follow me on Twitter or X at JohnnyJ_15. A reminder to go to Locked On Sports today and subscribe for 24/7 content. And you can find them on all the free Fire TV channels app. Until tomorrow, we're going to probably recap a little bit of what happened in Sunday's game and look ahead to another baseball-filled week of the Royals. You take it easy, Kansas City.